Is there anybody that would be honest with me that you ain't always been flawless all your life? Now, the flawless section is probably something over here. But if you like me and you up here with the flawed section, this is the flawed section right here. The flawless might be out there. But you know that God found you when you were in your mess.
Hallelujah.
You were in a place where you didn't even want to put up with yourself. And God found some value in you. And said, are you done running now? Some of y'all done changed so many times because folk, you wanted to change your life and identity so many times to be accepted by people. Not realizing that they didn't even want you in the beginning. And you done finally got comfortable with who God created you to be. That's why I love him. I love him. You don't know what he's done for me. That song right there, Don, you could sing that all 5 minutes, and I'd be happy. And I'd been happy, not all day, but because that's the truth. That's my testimony. You don't know, and I don't know what he did for you. And I'm gonna be honest with you. I ain't even gonna try to understand what he did for you. Amen. I know that he did it though, because you're here. Amen. You're still breathing. Amen.
Amen.
I don't know what those words meant when they were said to you and they said you should just kill yourself. I don't know what that did to you. I don't know what that relationship did to you when they misused you. I don't know what happened when you took that punch and you shouldn't have took that punch. I don't know. I don't know what happened when you were sitting in front of the Black River contemplating should you drive in. I don't know. But I know that he brought you out. I know he brought you out of your circumstance. And he brought you here today. Amen, somebody. My Bible's going to be open to 1 Samuel, the 17th chapter. And I won't be before you long at all. Don, right about that 5, you can start playing real. It's still early, ain't it? I know. We did all that in about an hour and some change. Now, Brother Jimmy, don't go too far now. You make me get me nervous when you get away too far. Don't get too far. Yeah, I know how far you get. Just make sure you can run back. All right. Starting at the 28th verse, 1 Samuel 17. When you get there, would you stand for the reading of the word? And I promise you, this will be the apex of your day. Now, let me warn you now, this message and this perspective that God has given me is kind of geared towards the memorial of today, but it's also dealing with where we go from here. All right? And it's found in our text. Matter of fact, I'm going to start at the 26th verse. 1 Samuel 17, 26. Your Bible should say something like this. And David said to the men standing by him, what shall be done for the man who kills the Philistine and takes away the reproach from Israel? If you have a highlighter or a pen in your hand, please underline reproach right there for me, please. Reproach. And for who is this uncircumcised Philistine, that he should defy the armies of the living God? And the men told him, thus shall it be done for the man who kills him. And now Eliab, his oldest brother, heard what he said to the men, and Eliab's anger was kindled against David and said, why did you come here? With whom have you left those few sheep in the wilderness? I know your presumption and your evilness of heart, for you have come down that you might see the battle. And David said, what have I done now? Was it not a harmless question? And David turned away from Eliab to another and asked the same question, and again the men gave the same answer. And when David's words were heard, they were repeated to Saul, and he sent for him. And David said to Saul, let no man's heart fail because of this Philistine. Your servant will go out and fight with him. if you would look at your neighbor and say, neighbor,
Neighbor,
the topic of today's discussion,
the topic of today's discussion is,
I'm silent,
I'm silent,
no more.
no more.
You may be seated in the presence of the Lord. Now, I promise you this. You know, we hear a lot in news, specifically about this idea of make America great again. And but many would say America is always great, or always been great, and it's never changed. But I wanted to give you some statistics to kind of dialogue about that just a little bit. Is that all right? If we're the greatest country in the world, then we should be the best in every possible area that would mark us to be great. However, we are 7th in literacy, we are 27th in math, 22nd in science, 49th in life expectancy, 178th in infant mortality, and 3rd in median household income. And we're 4th in the labor force, and 4th in exports. But there are 3 areas in which we are the absolute best. We lead the world in the most incarcerated citizens per capita. We also lead the world in the most defense spending. And we also lead the world in the country with the most people that believe in angels. That's the state of America. And who is to blame for the state of America? Is it the Democrats or is it the Republicans? No, not at all. It's the church. The church is at fault for the state of America. Why do you say so, preacher? I didn't come here to hear about your political views, and great, you still won't hear them. But I am very well aware of why and how God saved us. Many of us know what we are saved from, but we forget to understand what we are saved for. And what happens is now after we get our ticket to heaven and we have got the gates of hell closed in our life, we think that all we have to do is sit at the airport and wait for Jesus to return for his bride and sit there and do nothing. But David presents something very interesting to us. As David was a young man and he was just listening, and he was coming to bring food at the order of his father to his brothers, and he saw all these men of war who've been trained, hearing the shouts and the complaints of this Philistine, and they're sitting on the side and they're simply afraid of this Philistine. My first point I want you to identify in this particular topic of discussion: what has you paralyzed to death? What paralyzed you from moving and acting? What made you so afraid that you refused to even believe what God said about you? This Philistine came, and they said the size of him just brought terror. But I would render this opinion to you that it wasn't the size of Goliath that brought terror to the armies of Israel, but it was the words of Goliath that brought fear into this army. Why? Because they were hearing something they never heard before. Let me pause right there. Some of you grew up in a house where you were already told that the best you could hope for was social assistance. Some of you grew up in a household where you were told the best way you were going to make it was by living on your back. Some of you were already told that you better find a good job because you have no business running a business. And you've allowed those lies to shape your life. Look at your text here. Right? He says, then Eliab, his oldest brother, came. And he heard, and he got angry. He said, why did you come here? And he said, why did you leave? And who did you leave the sheep with? What was he saying to him? He said, you know, what I know you're supposed to be doing, but I understand your skill set. Who told you you need to get off that job at Family Dollar to try to go ahead and get a corporate job at Bank of America? Who told you have the right to stand in this line and even apply? Yeah. Who told you you even have the right to try to be a preacher when you can barely even pass your reading comprehension test? Who told you you have that right? Yeah. Who told you you should be in a choir when you can't even put 2 notes together? Who told you? Then this is very important for you to understand, beloved, that many of you right now have limited your life because you're listening to folk who don't even like you. Amen. Amen. You're not hearing me. See, this is the problem with us as the church. We have allowed the world to tell us what we can and what we cannot do. If you didn't realize, yesterday, Elder Wheeler, I was in the paper yesterday. And thank God I went in the obituary. I went on the obituary. Praise God, hallelujah. I'm still alive. Praise God. You're supposed to shout right there. Huh? I was on TV? Oh, I was on there too? Oh, praise God. I don't know how they began. That was just an actor. But I was there because they wanted to do a story. They heard that I was doing this big push about this youth transitional foster home. And so they began to ask me questions. And they wanted to ask me about, my corporation. They wanted to ask me about my, did you go through the IRS and get everything done? And what's your goal? And how are you going to make this happen? And really what they were trying to do is figure out, did I do all my research? Right. And they wanted to know, did I do all my homework? And they wanted to know if I was going to meet their standards. And what they didn't realize is that I already did the research, because we've already done something like this before, but we did it on a larger scale when we were in Miami. But as I listened to the questions, and then at the end, she said, we're going to put this up, we're going to run the story, we want some pictures of the house, and then we'll even end up putting the website so they can donate to you. Because what she was saying is that we find no fault in you. But what if I would have got discouraged while I was being tried and questioned? Here's a point. Some of you have given up because you don't think you have the answers to somebody's questions. Now, mind you, some of these people who were commenting, and they began to comment, they posted it on Facebook, and they had over 360, over 748 or so shares. So it went a lot of places, but there was a lot of comments. And somebody reached out and said, well, make sure you do this, and make sure you do that, and don't you realize it costs this to do that, and make sure you have this. And I was listening to people, and I looked at them, and then the Holy Spirit spoke to me and said, you don't have to pay attention to these comments. Amen. That's right. And why? Because they are not going to determine your success. Amen. Let me say it this way. Let me talk to this crowd. Somebody over here got a vision, and you're listening to the wrong comments. And it slowed down your progression in doing your vision. Amen. Let me explain this to you. David, when he began to hear his brother, here's another note. This is full. Please catch these notes. This is interesting. His brother, his blood brother, the one who was older, who was supposed to be guiding him, began to speak evil into his life. Began to speak against what God put in his heart to do. Let me explain something to you. Family ain't always right. Amen. Say it. Family is still, I know they're close. I know some of them may give you a sandwich over the few years you've been living with them. But the reality is they do not have the right to determine what God can say and not say in your life. Amen. Just like those folks who said, some folks just got on that thing to comment just because they wanted something negative to say. Yep. And I was excited about those folks because after the Holy Spirit told me, I just began to tell them more and more of my plan, and less started commenting. Amen. I said, I'm open for dialogue. You can talk to me one-on-one. We can meet. Why? Because, listen, I knew that God was going to bring me to this place one day. And so nothing in faith or in grace will ever replace preparation. Amen. Amen. Let me say it again. I know you believe in God for a vision. And God's grace and favor will be there. But I knew that this day was coming when God would call me to do this. And so back about, 3 years ago, we've been preparing for this moment. Writing plans, preparing and believing, getting all of our business in order. Because when the devil comes to accuse, make sure he has nothing but lies to say. Amen. See, if they would have ran, they ran through and they would say, well, you didn't do this. Well, that's fine. We had a plan for this, so we did this. Oh, but you're supposed to, oh, no, it's okay. We understand that the law says do this. See, if you don't, I don't care what God done told you and what you believe in him for, that does never negate you to do research.
That's right. That's right.
See, you got to understand. See, David knew what he could do. He came to him and then Saul put him out and said, listen, you can't fight because you're a young person. You're a youth. Meaning he was really trying to say, you don't know how to handle yourself in battle. Because Saul was comparing his story to his own. Saul been trained since he was a young person to fight. But David had to remind him, listen, I was back there in the woods and I ended up fighting a bear and I had to fight a lion and I had to protect this. God prepared me for this struggle. What you've been through in your life is preparing you for the moment that you would stop being silent about the injustices going on in the world today. Amen. Why is that important for you to know what I went through? Because God put a burden in my heart for this demographic, and he told me that everybody wouldn't like it, and everybody wouldn't want me to be successful. But he said that I put this burden in you. And the same way he put it in me, he also put something in you that you cannot allow to be out here in the world today. Amen. The reason why America's in a jacked up state because you hoping that the next president gonna fix the thing that God put in your heart to do.
Amen. Come on.
Amen.
Oh, see, you got quiet now. See, are you okay? When is somebody in this church gonna get mad enough at the fact that we still got a lot of teen pregnancies going on?
Come on, right? Come on.
When are we going to get mad enough and say we got too many homeless men and women on the streets in our very own city?
Yes.
That ain't the government's problem. That's the saints' problem who got that passion in their heart that's supposed to do something about it. Aren't you tired of young girls being afraid to walk down the street at a certain time because they may be attacked because the men and women of God won't stand up and protect our own streets?
Come on. Right.
Oh, it got quiet in here.
Yes.
You got a passion. You got something that God has put in your heart. Just like David. David said, listen, so you ain't got to worry about this thing. Now, look, this is the country, demonic version of the Bible. He said, look, you ain't got to worry about this thing. Look, I'm going to go up there for you and take care of it. I'm going to handle it. Now, mind you, David was the smallest thing out there. But he knew something that they didn't know. He knew that God was with him. Why am I saying that to you? There's something interesting. When you know that God is with you, then there's nothing that should ever be bigger than the issue, than that faith and that reality that God will overcome that struggle. I don't care how much money it costs. I don't care how much doubt's been in your life before. This is the time when you can make an adjustment and see God bring you out and bring it out through you.
Yes.
Aren't you tired of your children and your grandchildren struggling when all you got to do, baby, is just believe God in the vision He gave?
Amen.
Amen.
Look at your neighbor and say, it's in you.
It's in you.
Look at that neighbor and say, it's in you.
It's in you.
Now I want you to look at somebody else and tell them, I want you to prophesy to me and say, tell me it's in me.
Tell me it's in me.
Because listen, I need you to understand, I don't need everybody to believe in me. I just need the right person to believe in me. I don't need everybody to stand with me. I just need those faithful few that's going to encourage me. Listen, I ain't here to try to convince all of you that I'm doing the right thing. Matter of fact, I'm lying to you. I really ain't trying to convince any of y'all I'm doing the right thing. I just know the burden that's on my heart won't let me sleep. The burden for these young folks won't let me go to pass. And I believe that every young person has a right to live in a safe environment despite what decisions they're making.
Amen.
I'm not going to hate on them because they're making decisions I don't agree with. It means that I got better teaching I need to do for them.
Amen.
I need to take some time and encourage these young folks and make sure I bring them to that place where God has called them to.
Amen. Amen.
David, you know the story. David then began to fight Goliath, and he just got some stones and he got a slingshot, and he just began to use his tool, and then he hit Goliath. Now, the interesting thing that I never understood, Sister Ronnie, is why of all the weapons available to David did he use a slingshot and some rocks? And little do we know and understand, in the historical Hebrew society, the shepherd had tools of their choice. And the tool of his choice was a slingshot. And this is what God trained him up in and used and prepared him with. That was the tool. So what he did is when he got into the biggest battle of his life, he had to refer to the tool that he was most familiar with. And so what I'm telling you is, church, we don't need to continue to try to ask the world, how do we fix this issue? We don't need to wait for the government to give us insight. We need to turn to the tool that we are most familiar with. And that ought to be that altar. It ought to be that place of prayer. Because if we remember, it's not the fact that there was a big bailout going out that you got out. It's not the fact that the Democrats were giving out money. It's not the fact that folk were going on the street trying to help you. It's the fact that you learned to go to God in prayer to get clear direction and instruction that you might overcome this struggle. And so when they begin to talk about me, Brother Donna, all I had to do was turn to prayer and say, God, what should I do? He said, keep doing what I called you to do. And I'll take care of your offense. I'll take care of those folks who are talking about you. I'll deal with that. Listen, don't get distracted trying to defend yourself when God called you to be on the offensive.
Amen.
There's somebody in here today that's struggling with that reality. You are sitting right here in this church and you're afraid to trust God for what He's showing you. You saying, you know what, Pastor, I would love to start this home, or I would love to help these young people. I would even love to give my baby some more money, but I just got enough for me, and that's all I got. Let me encourage you today. The same God that brought you that little bit is the same God that can bring you some more.
Amen.
I told you that story of that testimony of that young girl simply because everybody gave up on her. But the same God that did it for her will do it again and again and again. What are you sitting on right here? What gift are you sitting on? What amount of money are you sitting on? What promise are you sitting on because you're afraid because of what liars and cheaters and heathens have said about you? You done doubted yourself. You done talked your own self out of trusting in God. I ain't serving that church. That ain't making me no money. I don't know. Look, I gotta be at my job. I ain't gonna be doing this. Look, I know your family came to you and said, listen, she ain't gonna never be nothing. Look at all that stuff she done did in her life. Look at all those things. I come to tell you, God got a different word for you today. He's got a word that this is your moment, that your life will never be the same again because I am with you. A song by Kathy Crown said, you know, I was sure by now, God, you would have reached down and wiped my tears away. Can you remember how many times you were praying and believing God to deliver you and you were still stuck in that circumstance? Remember you kept crying and praying and crying and praying. But then all of a sudden, God brought you out. The same God that did it then is the same God that will do it today. I've come to encourage you and tell you that you need to believe God again. Everybody stand to your feet.